Hey there, everybody. Welcome. Glad you're here. We're going to have yet another one of our great late night conversations. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night chat. Later than usual, because on Wednesday evenings, we have our weekly Center for Political Innovation members check-in, right? We have our official members meeting on Saturday, and then everyone who's in the active members group is invited to a Wednesday night check-in that we do at 9 p.m. It's a great boost. All our great community members were on there tonight. Well, not all of them, but many of them were. Right. It was a great meeting we just had, and some new people who've just recently joined and some longtime members who've been with us for a while. It's just a great meeting. And we do that, right? CPI is an active community. And the reason we started doing those check-ins was part of the outreach shift that we did. During the innovationist turn, we decided we were going to be an outreach-oriented group. And so we started doing those Wednesday night meetings, and we've been doing them pretty much every week since then. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing I could talk about. We're going to do our normal live stream tonight, just the same way we always do. First, my opening remarks, then the roll call. Then I will answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So send a Rumble rant if you're on the Rumble. Send a Cash App. You can Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. The best way, the absolute best way to send questions for the second half of the show is to go to buymeacoffee.com and send it. And you can send it anonymously. There's no limit on the number of characters. Just send your question, go to Buy Me a Coffee and send your question. That's the way we do it. So as far as announcements, join the Center for Political Innovation. Membership is rising. We got a couple new members this week that we're going to be checking in with. Very exciting. If you want to join the community of people that is actually dedicated to moving beyond globalism and imperialism and fighting for the working families of America, join CPI. Join the Center for Political Innovation, become a member and become active, right? If you want to just pay dues, you're welcome to do that. But a lot of our members are active, and that's even better. We are building a vibrant community of people dedicated to making this happen. Very, very good. So, yeah, mark your calendar for August 15th for the National Convention this year. It'll be in the Chicago area. If you're a member of CPI and you'd like to spend a week getting to know people, the 7-day program that we're doing is August 12th through August 19th. That's going to be pretty awesome as well. So as I said before, we'll be following our usual format. Send questions for the second half of the show. Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your questions. It's a great way to do it. You can also do Rumble rants, and you can also Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22. Now, the theme tonight is about the fall of the Roman Empire. And is there anything that we can learn from the fall of the Roman Empire? And that's how I themed it tonight. And that's an important theme. And we've actually been talking about that for a long time, right? When CPI first got going, the first textbook we ever put out was We Are City Builders. It has a big, long section about the fall of Rome. A lot of quotes from the recently deceased Michael Parenti, the great anti-imperialist writer, and a lot of quotes from Karl Kautsky and his analysis of the foundations of Christianity. In this textbook, the first textbook we ever put out, talked about the fall of the Roman Empire. But I feel like my understanding of why Rome fell has been getting richer and richer and richer. And we've been learning together as a community. I gave a lecture on the fall of the Roman Empire in like 2018, 2017, something like that. But if I look back on it now, I feel like a lecture I would give now would be even more in depth. So I'm just going to give you straight up my understanding of why the Roman Empire fell, just straightforward. And then we'll go from there. We'll talk about something else that's very much related that got me thinking about this. Folks, I have come to understand that there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made. That all that exists in the universe is one substance. And that God and spiritual forces and energy and matter and physical material are all derived from that one substance. And that this thinking stuff from which the universe is made is something that human beings not only are made of, but have the ability to tap into. And that this is something that many people have pointed out. Human beings are not like any other species. They're not like any other animal. Human beings reinvent their relationship with nature. And human beings don't merely interact with their environment, they force the environment to serve them. And that human beings are constantly reinventing their relationship with nature by getting more in touch with the thinking stuff and allowing the thinking stuff of this universe to flow through them more effectively. Human beings are the creative species. Some people talk about humans as the tool-making species. Some people talk about human beings as the species with consciousness. Human beings are the tool-making species, the conscious species. Human beings are the creative species. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. And bees have been making their beehives the same way for thousands of years. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. But in just 7,000-8,000 years, human beings have gone from hunter-gatherer civilization, primitive tribalism, living in the woods and hunting and gathering for our daily subsistence with a life expectancy of no higher than 30, to where we are now in outer space, communicating through telecommunication technology, with the internet, artificial intelligence. I mean, what human beings have done is amazing. And it is that thinking stuff, that creative power from which all things flow. That is the basis of what gives human beings the ability to do this. And that civilizations flourish when they are enabling human beings to become less like animals and to be more in touch with the thinking stuff from which the universe is made. Human progress throughout history has been human beings tapping into the thinking stuff, tapping into and embracing their creative side, letting the cosmic power, letting the divine energy, the universal prime energy, whatever you want to call it, flow through them and ascend to a higher plane and innovate and develop new technological advances that come with new social relations and new modes of production. And that's the struggle of human history. Human beings have been constantly innovating, reinventing their relationship with the environment and transcending to a higher plane of existence, expanding their population, expanding their life expectancy, living a more comfortable life, and using energy and resources in a more efficient way. And that is the brilliance and the beauty of humanity, has been our ability to do so. And that, yeah, when human beings started out on this course, you could argue that we were living a bestial existence. But gradually throughout human history, human beings have become more and more human and almost more and more godlike and less like animals. And that civilizations thrive when they are tapping into human creative power and enabling human beings to innovate and enabling human beings to let the thinking substance of the universe flow through them. And human beings create civilizations that fall apart and deteriorate when that side of humanity is being suppressed, when humanity is no longer innovating and creating, and when artificial restraints and restrictions on human creativity and thought are imposed. At that point, civilizations begin to deteriorate, and that history does not move in a straight line. The general road of human history is toward a higher plane of existence, a longer life expectancy, a larger population. But there are regressions. There are times that humanity seems like it's moving ahead, and then there are great regressions that take place. And one of the greatest regressions in human history that we've experienced so far was the fall of the Roman Empire. Rosa Luxemburg referred to the fall of the Roman Empire at the beginning of the First World War. As World War I was breaking out, Rosa Luxemburg, the German Marxist thinker born in Poland, she wrote this: "This world war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. At first, this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war, but then, when the period of unlimited wars begins, it progresses towards its inevitable consequences. The triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery." The Roman Empire had a slave economy. It was based on slavery, the mode of production defined by human beings owning other human beings, in which there are two classes. There are landowners and slaves. There are people who own land and, as a result, also own people, and there are slaves. That's the slave mode of production. Slavery emerged out of human history. I guess Marx talked about the Asiatic mode of production that eventually gave rise to slavery. Slavery was the mode of production that they had in ancient Egypt. It was the mode of production that they had in Greece at the height of Greek civilization. It was the mode of production they had in Mesopotamia, and it was ultimately the mode of production of the Roman Empire. And Rome flourished at first because it built a mighty army, and that army was based on the Italian peninsula, and that army controlled trade routes, and that mighty army that they built had the ability to extract slaves from different parts of the world. In the Roman Empire, Rome was a city-state on the Italian peninsula, and it gradually expanded outward, and they conquered pretty much all of the Mediterranean, and they conquered North Africa, and they conquered the Middle East, and they conquered Europe all the way up into Britain, up into Scotland. The Roman Empire conquered the entire known world because they had a mighty army, and that what they tended to do was they would go into a local area and they would let the local king stay intact after militarily subduing him and forcing him to give them slaves and tribute. Right. And as long as they gave their slaves, gave so many slaves to the Romans every year, and as long as they gave so much tribute to the Romans every year, they let the local kings stay intact. But they did have a rule: all roads lead to Rome. You could not build your own road, and you could not build your own trade route. And that Rome was the global middleman between all trade. All trade went through them. All roads went through them. All sea routes went through them. They were the global middleman. Anyone who wanted to do business had to do it through them. And local kings and local governments stayed intact, but they were the middleman. They were the giant army that built roads and extracted slaves and tributes, all concentrated in one mighty city. Rome, on the Italian peninsula, was the precursor of Atlanticism, the sea-based civilization, where wealth is concentrated in one mighty city, in which control of trade routes is how dominance is established. That was the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire prospered for a time, but it had a problem, which was that the slave system is very, very inefficient. Why is slavery inefficient? Why is slavery an inefficient way of doing things? Because a slave has almost no motivation to work. Right? Well, I mean, if a slave works really hard, what, is he going to get a promotion? No. Slave works really, really hard. Is he going to make more money? No. A slave's only motivation to work is to avoid punishment. And on a small scale, slavery can work because as the household gets wealthier, right? Say there's a farmer, right? There's a little landowner who has like 12 slaves and his wife and kids. Well, those slaves will work pretty hard because as the household gets wealthier, they'll see some of that wealth, right? So on a small scale, the slave kind of has a motivation to work because while maybe he doesn't get an equal share, if the household gets wealthier, if they're producing more crops, he gets more. But when you have a huge plantation of hundreds and hundreds of people growing crops, no matter how hard they work, they are not going to see any advance. When you have a mine, the Romans had their mines that extracted minerals from the earth for metals, etc. When you have a mine, you got hundreds of slaves working in those mines, often being worked to death. They have absolutely no motivation to work. And the bigger the Roman Empire got, the less and less efficient their mode of production became. That the more slaves you get, the less the slaves work, right? The only way you can get a slave to work is by threatening him with punishment. And the more slaves you get, the harder it is to stay on top of slaves to work. And the more slaves they got, the less and less efficient it became. And Rome's ability to produce products, to grow crops, to produce metal and other necessary tools was constantly deteriorating because of the fact that they relied on slave labor. Now, feudalism is different than slavery. Feudalism is a system where you don't have slaves, you have what are called serfs or peasants. And the way it works is you have a landowner, but then every peasant has his little piece within the feudal commons or within the estate. And he works and he grows the crops on that estate. And then he gives his taxes to the landowner, but then he gets to keep everything that's left over. So he has a motivation to work, right? A serf is going to work a lot harder than a slave because he gets to keep what's left over. And it's still an unfair relationship, right? He's doing all the work and the landowner just owns the land, so he gets money. It's not fair by any means, right? And that, the peasants were often ripped off and cheated, etc. And there's many aspects of feudalism that are highly unfair. But one fundamental difference between it is that a serf has more motivation to work, far more motivation to work than a slave. And around the world, as the Roman Empire was deteriorating, feudalism was starting to emerge, and it was a more efficient system. And the Romans figured that the only way they could stay in power was holding back feudalism. They maintained their slave economy. They held on to slave relations, and they beat down and suppressed countries that were developing a more efficient mode of production called feudalism. And that is what we need to understand about the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was based on one mighty military dominating trade routes. And it was an inefficient, outmoded system that refused to change. And as a more efficient system was emerging, they were hostile to it. And eventually, the Roman Empire got to the point that they were holding back historical progress. They were suppressing human creativity, right? They saw new inventions and technology being created, and they suppressed them because they were a threat to the slave system. Right? As new developments were emerging, they suppressed them. And as a result, Rome gradually became a society that was deteriorating. And it got towards the end of the Roman Empire, they couldn't even raise their own army. It got to the point that they had to hire Germanic tribes to fight other Germanic tribes. We hear about the barbarians. At the time the Romans were fighting the Germanic tribes, the Romans had to hire other Germanic tribes to fight them. They couldn't raise their own military. And the reason that Michael Parenti, the late Michael Parenti's book about Julius Caesar that I have here is so important is that Michael Parenti shows in this book that Rome had a chance to survive. That originally Rome was I wouldn't say a democracy. It was a republic. It was an elected government that the landowning people, the majority of the Romans were slaves, but among the landowners, they elected leaders. They had a hereditary Senate and an elected National Assembly. It was the Roman Republic, right? Rather than having an emperor at first, they were the Roman Republic. And why had Rome adopted a republican form of government? Because there were many landowning families, and that it was a way to motivate them to go and fight the wars, right? Every Roman citizen had to serve in the army, and the Romans went out and conquered all these people. And there was an understanding that if they had an elected government where all the major families had a seat in the Senate, where they got to vote in the National Assembly, that the loot that they got from the rest of the world would be more equitably distributed, that everyone would get a vote in how that loot was divided. If they just had one king, all the people that were close to the king and were in with the king might go fight the wars, but the other people would say, hey, if we win the war and we get a bunch more slaves and we get a bunch more tribute, we're not going to see any benefit. But by having a system where more inclusion was carried, where all the landowning families got a vote, that motivated people to go out and plunder, because there was an understanding that they had some skin in the game. They were, quote unquote, invested in the nation. And that's why Rome was a republic at the beginning. It was a way of motivating the population, the landowners, to go out and fight the wars. Now, Rome, increasingly, as it got to be more wealthy, they began importing a new type of person. And this is where it gets very, very interesting. So at first, Rome is just landowners and slaves. But as Rome grows and grows, and they're building colosseums, and they're holding chariot races, and they're becoming a more and more prosperous and wealthy society, that the landowning families, the patricians and the plebeians of Rome, are becoming more and more wealthy. They start bringing in skilled craftsmen from around the world. And these skilled craftsmen are mostly Greeks and Jews. Greeks from the Greek islands, Jews from Palestine. And the craftsmen are brought in to do what a slave couldn't do, right? A craftsman, you didn't hire a craftsman to pick the wheat and, pick the field and harvest the field. You could get a slave to do that. A craftsman had a specific skill. A craftsman was a blacksmith who knew exactly how to work with the metal. A craftsman was a carpenter who knew how to work with wood. In some cases, you had doctors that could heal the sick, right? And then there was medical knowledge in ancient Greece. So you had Greek doctors, right? That were, early primitive medical people, right? You brought in craftsmen, bricklayers, bricklayers. It's a skilled trade. People who had some kind of skill that a regular slave couldn't do. And that was the beginning of what we now call the proletariat, right? A slave is not a proletarian. A slave doesn't get a wage. Somebody else owns him. A proletarian is not owned by anyone else, but he does not own any property. He is neither a slave owner or a landowner, nor is he a slave, right? He is a wage worker. And the word proletarian, or proletari in the Roman, the Latin, it actually means those who have children or those who have offspring, because the only property that a proletarian had was their children, right? That their children were considered to be their property under Roman law, and they didn't have any land. They rented where they lived and paid rent out of the wages they received. They received wages for their work. And Rome increasingly became populated by people that were not landowners or slave owners, and not slaves, but proletarians. And Rome began to fill up with proletarians, people from all over the world, mainly Greece and Palestine, but also from North Africa, also from Europe. And increasingly, you had proletarians in Rome who rented the place that they lived, who worked for wages. And as a result, Rome started to have problems that had not existed before. One of those problems was unemployment, right? A slave is never unemployed. He might starve to death. The master might, not have a shortage of food and decide not to feed him or something. But a slave is never unemployed. But if a proletarian can't find work, can't support himself, can't feed his kids, he's unemployed. Homelessness, right? A slave is never homeless, right? There's some place on the slave master's plantation or land that the slave lives. But a proletarian, especially in Rome, they were not landowners. So if they couldn't get any work, they were out on the street. And that many of these great kings from around the world that would visit Rome, right, after being kind of brought into the Roman Empire, they come and visit this capital city, the capital of the modern world. They would see Rome and they would say, this is the capital of the world. Why are there desperately poor, starving kids running up and down the street, stealing from people all the time? Why are there homeless children everywhere? Why are there beggars everywhere? Why are there people sleeping on the streets? This doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes sense because Rome was where you had the first proletarians. And Rome started to fill up with proletarians. Many people from around the world came to Rome because if you had a skill as a craftsman or a pipe fitter or whatever, you could work there. Rome began to fill up with proletarians. And so as the different Roman landowners were contending with each other for power, you got a type of figure that emerged that was called a populare. And that was a type of politician who rallied the proletarians and used the proletarians against the other landowners to get his way. He was a populist or a Bonapartist. The Gracchi brothers were an example of this. These were two brothers. They were called the Gracchi brothers. And they built an army of proletarians to assert themselves and get their way against the Roman Empire. I think there was a bit of a civil war as the Gracchi brothers tried to assert themselves. And the Roman Republic, the final years of the Roman Republic, were defined by one populare, a general, Julius Gaius Caesar, who was a populare who was very, very popular. And Julius Caesar was elected as the imperator, or the head of the National Assembly, the head of state, like the president. And he was very popular with the Roman proletarians, and that he was constantly doing things to improve their lives. One thing that he did was that he created public libraries. And these libraries weren't for people to go and read books for interest. It was where the laws were written down. So poor people, if they, proletarians, if they were fighting and having a legal dispute, they could go to the public library and they could read the Roman laws for themselves and invoke the law in their legal arguments. Another thing that Julius Caesar did is he made it illegal for any doctor to be enslaved, right? Because, many skilled proletarians had medical knowledge from Greece, and that's how they fed themselves. But some of the richer people started to have slave doctors. And Julius Caesar said, nope, if you are a doctor, you cannot be enslaved. And many doctors, slave doctors, some doctor was brought to be a slave for a wealthy Roman. They got their freedom and they started charging people for their medical care because Julius Caesar freed them. Now, many of the proletarians who were in Rome were Jews. They were Jewish people from Palestine who'd come to Rome because they had a skill, like being a bricklayer or being a carpenter or being a metal worker. So Julius Caesar legalized monotheism, right? Rome was a polytheistic society. They believed in many different gods. And one of their laws had been that monotheism was illegal. If you said there is only one God, then you were denying the great gods of the Roman Empire. You were saying that Mars and Jupiter and Saturn didn't exist. And so it was illegal to practice the Jewish religion in Rome. But so many of the proletarians that came in were Jews from Palestine, and Judaism teaches that there is only but one God. And so Julius Caesar legalized the Jewish religion, which was a big deal, right? Jews were free to believe their faith that there was only one God. And Julius Caesar started hiring the unemployed. He saw that there were unemployed people, and so he used tax money to hire the unemployed bricklayers and the unemployed carpenters and the unemployed craftsmen. And he sent them to other cities. He sent them to Athens. He sent them to Alexandria. He sent them to various other cities throughout the Roman Empire to build infrastructure, to pave roads, right? To lay the foundations. And it turned out that towards the end of his life, Julius Caesar had a plan. Julius Caesar realized that if the Roman Empire continued to be centered around one city, it was doomed. And so he developed a plan that was really, it was like a 44 BC version of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Julius Caesar's plan was to make the various city-states, Constantinople, right, Ephesus, right, Athens, to make the various city-states throughout the empire into trading hubs and give the vote to the landowners in those cities, so that not only would Roman landowners get to vote, but also the people of these various city-states would get to vote. And Michael Parenti in his book talks about how that really was the red line. How giving the vote to the people throughout the empire in these various city-states he was building up, as he was sending unemployed Roman workers to build up these cities throughout the empire, giving them the vote was a red line. Also, he launched a land distribution program. He started taking some of the big estates of wealthy Roman families that had a huge amount of land and dividing up some of the land and giving it to proletarians so they could actually become landowners. He wanted to have more landowners, have more diversity. And all of this is what led to Julius Caesar on 44 BC, the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BC. He went to the Roman Senate, and he went to the Roman Senate to give a speech. And he went there, and he was surprised as the wealthy senators, the hereditary families that ruled the Roman Empire, one by one stabbed him in the back. And they stabbed him over and over and over again, and he was killed. And he lay dead in the Roman Senate. And the poor people, the proletarians of Rome, rioted, and there was a huge riot throughout the city. And they broke into the homes of rich people and took their furniture and broke it up, and they set a giant fire in the center of Rome, and they cremated Julius Caesar. And then there was a civil war between Julius Caesar's nephew, Octavian, and Mark Antony, who had been one of the conspirators who'd killed Julius Caesar. And ultimately, Octavian, Julius Caesar's nephew, won the civil war, and he abolished the republic, and he became the emperor. And he was the first emperor of Rome, Caesar Augustus. And they also built a giant temple to Julius Caesar after his death, and they declared that in death he had become a god, that after being stabbed to death on the floor of Rome, that he had ascended into heaven, and they made him a god. And that's how Rome ceased to be a republic and became a monarchy, an empire. And they taught that the Roman emperor was a god on earth. That was their teaching. And Rome was centered around an emperor. And as a result, Rome never became multipolar. It continued to be centered around one mighty city. And it became more and more inefficient. And as they rejected technological innovation, and as their slave plantations and their slave mines became less and less efficient, and as the Romans themselves stopped really believing in what the empire was about, what they call cynicism set in, where a lot of Romans didn't even really believe in the ideas of the Roman Empire. They weren't really excited about building an empire to begin with. As cynicism set in, as the rich became more and more selfish, as the central, mission, they'd all been excited, we're going to go out and build this mighty empire. And then it had turned into, no, we're actually just, who cares? As, they talked about, you had the hedonist philosophy that lived for pleasure. You had the Stoicist philosophy that sought enlightenment through self-mutilation. And gradually Rome just deteriorated. And it was over a course of hundreds of years. There wasn't one day that Rome just fell. But the Roman Empire divided between the East and the West, and the Roman Empire fractured here and there, and pretty soon there was no Roman Empire. But the fall of the Roman Empire was not a good thing. And that many people look at the Roman Empire and they say, oh, but the fall of the Roman Empire was great because Rome was evil. Yes, Rome was evil. An awful slave society, practiced infanticide, was just brutal in so many ways, publicly torturing people in the Colosseum. I mean, yes, all that's true. But life didn't get better when Rome fell. The height of people decreased by inches. The life expectancy of human beings went down by years. The population of Europe very significantly decreased after the fall of the Roman Empire. It took Europe 1,100 years to get back to the population level that it had at the time of the Roman Empire. 1,100 years. Now, the fall of Rome was not a good thing, but it was a society that to some degree or other had been enabling people to be creative, had been tapping into people's creative impulses, that thinking stuff, that creative power that flows through human beings, that had been enabling people to have new inventions and innovating. It got stuck. It got to the point that it wasn't doing that any longer. Got to the point that it was holding back human progress and human creativity. And other societies were becoming more efficient and innovating, and new inventions were being made, and they were suppressing them. And Rome became a society that didn't unleash and enable human creative power. It became a society that suppressed and held back and stamped on human creative power, a society that was pushing for people to be more bestial and less human, less in touch with the thinking stuff from which the universe is made, and more like the beasts of the forest, more primitive, more barbaric, more governed by their bodily desires. And as the Roman Empire deteriorated, humanity suffered a big setback. And the reason the Center for Political Innovation talks about this, the reason we talk about the assassination of Julius Caesar as a negative turning point, the Ides of March, it's actually the CPI holiday, City Builders Day, March 15th. That's when we tell this story. And the reason that Rosa Luxemburg made this point in 1914 at the beginning of World War I, and the reason that we're even talking about this is very related to our time. We live in a society that has a problem, a very, very big problem, which is that human beings are creative creatures, and human beings are capable of inventing all kinds of things, but we have an economic system where poverty is created by abundance. There has never been an economic system in history that had this problem. In hunter-gatherer civilization, if there was a lot of fruit to hunt and gather, the tribe lived well. If there was a lot of animals to hunt and kill, the tribe lived well. In slavery, right? If they had a good harvest and there was a lot of crops, that was good for everybody. In feudalism, you had an abundance of crops, an abundance, that was good. But only in our economic system do you have a problem called glut. G-L-U-T, glut. It is a uniquely capitalist problem. Poverty amid plenty. Poverty created by abundance. It's starting in 1825. Every couple years, the stock markets of Europe would crash. They would have a panic on the stock market. Why? Because so much wealth had been created. So much wealth had been created, and there was nobody to buy the products, right? The worker is also the consumer. The amount of wages paid out in the process of creating wealth are never enough to buy back that wealth that is created, right? If you have a factory and that factory churns out $5,000 worth of tires, you cannot pay the workers in that factory $5,000, or else you won't make a profit and you won't be able to pay for the material of the tires. right? The wages paid out in the process of production are never enough to buy back that which is produced. There is always more product than wages paid out. And the worker is also the consumer. And so the worker can't buy back what he produces. And the market becomes saturated with products from which there is not enough purchasing power for them to be sold. And this problem is constant. And this problem of having a panic on the stock market, it happened every few years, but it gets worse due to technology. Technology eliminates workers from the assembly line, and it makes it cheaper to produce products. However, it is only from human labor power that you can extract profit. The value put in by human labor power is the source of the profit that the employer makes. And so as technology advances and the role of the worker at the assembly line decreases, the rate of profit on each item also decreases. And as a result, you then have to fill the market up with even more products to make up the losses. And this problem of glut gets worse, right? We have an economic system where our government spends billions of dollars every year buying agricultural products like cheese and burying them to keep the price of dairy high enough. We have a situation where our economy cannot function unless our government spends billions and billions and billions of dollars buying tanks and bombs and drones and weapons that, my goodness, I hope we never have to use, because we could blow up the world 2-3 times over and kill all of humanity with all the nukes and weapons we've got. We're not making them because we need to use them. We're making them because that is an artificial way to keep our economy going, because we cannot buy back what we are producing. Capitalism has this built-in problem of poverty amid abundance, poverty amid plenty, overproduction, glut, value crisis, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, where human beings continue to be creative, and capitalism needs human beings to be creative. But the more creative we get, the more unstable our economy becomes. And so, as this problem persists, we then get a situation where we get some people at the top that are wanting things to be more stable, that are wanting things to not lead to turmoil and chaos. And they say, all right, we have this problem of glut, we have this problem of technology, we have all these people that have no role at the assembly line. We're going to cull the herd. And all these dark fantasies from the World Economic Forum and the World Business Forum and Bill Gates and all of that, all these dark, sinister fantasies, it's pretty clear what they are. It is the elite at Davos, the elite at the Ford Foundation, the elite at the Council on Foreign Relations, sitting down and saying, how do we prevent the massive unrest that's going to result from the built-in problems here? You know, what do we do? And their solution to save the system is degrowth. Degrowth. Drive down the population, drive down the living standards, and shove human creativity back in a box. Stop the march of human progress so they can stay at the top forever. That's what they have decided to do. And just like the Roman leaders decided that they were going to stop human progress, we have people at the top of our world, the more managerial capitalists, that Anglo-Eastern establishment that runs the United States, right? The people descended from Lord Milner's Roundtable Group and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Rockefellers and all the managerial, Bill Gates, all of them are up there saying, in order to make this system work and to keep us at the top, we have just got to shove humanity into a box. You'll live in a pod, you'll eat bugs, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy about it, and they'll still own the world. And that's what they've got. But there's a big section of the world that's not accepting that. Around the world, various countries that used to be under the domination of Wall Street and London have broken out. And they have governments that come out of anti-colonial revolutions. And they've taken control of their economies. And they've said, we're going to use the state to unleash human creativity. We're going to have a government that invests in human creative power. We're going to have a government that doesn't see its job as just managing the private affairs of capitalists, a government that doesn't see its job as forcibly depopulating. We're going to have a government that has a 5-year economic plan to oversee economic growth. That's what they have in China. Every 5 years, the Chinese government comes out with a plan that includes growth targets. We're going to raise living standards this much. We're going to raise the population this much. We're going to raise people's incomes this much. We're going to increase electrification, increase roads, increase railways. We're going to have new inventions. They come out with a growth plan. And you go to Russia. They do the same thing, right? Putin fixed Russia's economy from the fall of the Soviet Union by putting oil and gas at the center of the economy. And Putin and his economic advisors, they sit down and they say, what are we going to do this year to make Russia a more prosperous country? How are we going to invest in our people and their creative labor power to make Russia more prosperous? They have a 5-year economic plan, and they come out with their plan and they make Russia stronger. And that's what Ibrahim Traore, the great African leader, is doing. He has a plan, and he sits down with his generals and his leaders, and they have a plan to make their kids more smart and educated, to increase agricultural output and grow their own food, to increase electrification, to increase transportation access. Every year they make a plan. And we have states that don't view their job as just letting the rich rule over people and letting these problems of poverty amid plenty. States that don't view their job as degrowing like our Western states do, but states that invest in human creative power. And that is the secret to whether a civilization grows. When a civilization is crushing and suppressing human creative power, like the Roman Empire did, that civilization falls. But when you have a state that is unleashing and giving birth and enabling human creative power, when you have an innovationist government, a government of action that fights for working families and invests in communities and is enabling people to go out and create and build, when you have that kind of government, a society prospers and blossoms. And that is how civilizations thrive, when they tap into unleashing that thinking stuff from which all things are made, that energy, that spiritual power that defines the universe. When you have a society that invests in that, then a society can prosper. And that is why this message is so important. And that's what the Center for Political Innovation understands. That it is human creative power and human labor and human work and human innovation that drives forward history, and that civilizations thrive when they tap into that, invest in it, and unleash it, and civilizations die when they suppress it. And that right now, the problem that the West is facing is that human creative power has outstripped the narrow limits of production organized for profit. The anarchy of production, the chaos of the market is too weak to handle all that human beings are capable of right now. What we're able to do with artificial intelligence, what we're able to do with self-driving cars that are just a few years away, it doesn't fit into the narrow restrictions of production organized for profit. Just like the Romans held on to slavery while this more advanced system of feudalism was out there and was working, we're holding on to capitalism and the rule of profits, while there are more advanced civilizations and more advanced orders that are organizing the economy rationally and planning out growth and unleashing creativity and now allowing civilizations to rise that are thriving. And that is the issue. And what we need in America, we have two choices. Our society is heading for a crossroads. We can go the way of Rome. Depopulation, desolation, a great cemetery, or we can join this new world with a government here that breaks the power of the big monopolies, breaks the power of Wall Street, breaks the power of the big bankers and oil monopolies, and invests in the people. A government of action that will fight for working families. Right now, our government realizes that its economy doesn't work, realizes that the world is slipping out of the fingers of the big monopolies of the West. And so they've decided that they are just going to go to war with every country that is broken out of their grip. They're going to go to war with Russia. They're going to go to war with China. They're going to go to war with Iran. They're going to go to war with Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua. They're going to go to war with Mali and Niger and Burkina Faso. They're going to wage war and you mobilize their military industrial complex, this spending mechanism to inject money into their naturally unstable system to try and prevent having gluts of overproduction. They're going to mobilize their military industrial complex to just attack every country they can't control. And they're hoping that maybe that'll prolong their system a little bit. Meanwhile, they've decided that they are going to pump us full of pessimism. They're going to tell the next generation of young people that there's no point in life. They're going to pump into our heads that human beings are a cancer on the earth, that depopulation is the answer. They're going to put drugs and mind control everywhere. They're going to put poisonous chemicals everywhere, and they're going to do everything they can to make us poorer, and take away our will to live, make us pessimistic, make us hopeless, and take away our freedoms and put us into that pod that we're supposed to live in, where we own nothing and eat bugs and we're happy about it. That's what they're planning to do. And they will fail because humanity is an innovative, creative species that is in touch with the thinking stuff from which all universe is made. They will fail. But there will be a conflict. And it's not a competition, it's a conflict. They are actively trying to stop humanity from advancing, and humanity is going to have to push back. And it's going to be a conflict, and that conflict is raging right now in the Donbass region. The dying system put a fascist government that hates Russia into power in Ukraine. That government started bombing and killing the people of the Donbass regions. And Russia, that is broken out of the Western system and is building, has had to come to the aid of the people in Donetsk and Lugansk. And there is a war happening at this very moment between the part of the world that believes in growth and the Western Malthusian system. The British are the main architects of the conflict in Ukraine. And today in Iran, the Iranian people are out in the streets celebrating their revolution, celebrating that they broke out of the Western system, celebrating that they have a government that is leading the world in fusion energy research. They have a government that has electrified every corner of Iran, a government that is making sure the entire population is employed, right? And they're celebrating the fact that they are part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, celebrating the fact that they are aligned with this rising new world. Right now in Yemen, they have a leader, a revolutionary movement that emerged saying that Yemen is a wealthy country. We've got lots of oil. We've got lots of arable land, but we're under the domination of international bankers. This shouldn't be. Economic development is the rallying cry of the Houthi movement. It's one of their main slogans. Their official logo has a gun and a hand and a shaft of wheat for economic development. That is what they are fighting for. And if you read the sermons of Hussein al-Houthi that we translated, CPI, we published a book, Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? If you read the sermons of Hussein al-Houthi, the founder of Ansar Allah, the Houthi movement, it's about economic development. They want Yemen to not be an artificially impoverished country any longer. That's what they want, right? And it's a battle for economic development. If you listen to the speeches of Ibrahim Traore, the great African leader, that's what he's fighting for, economic development, empowering people through investing in communities and human labor power. And that's why the fall of Rome is important. And that's what we can learn from it. But tonight, I actually want to talk about something different. I'm going to start talking about that in a minute. But if you got any questions, right, anything you want me to talk about after I'm done with my long spiel, my opening remarks here tonight, please send a Rumble rant or you can Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, but the best way is to buy me a coffee. If you got something you want me to talk about during the second half of the show, buy me a coffee is the best way to do it. Buy me a coffee, send me something to talk about in the second half of the show. Give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. But anyway, so why am I thinking about Rome? Because I just wrote a book. It should be available shortly. And I've been thinking a lot about this lady. This lady's name is Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg. Now, Rosa Luxemburg, she was born in Poland from a Jewish family, but a secular Jewish family. Didn't practice the Jewish religion, a secular Jewish family. And at a young age, she got very, very interested in economics. She was exceptionally smart. They didn't really encourage girls to get educated back then as much. They didn't encourage girls to study mathematics and economics, but she was exceptionally intelligent at a young age. And at a young age, she studied at, university, and she got involved in leftist politics. She became a Marxist, and she wrote her college thesis on the economy of Poland. And she did something that was very brave at the time, which is that at the time, she was a young Marxist who was studying economics at the university there in Poland. And all the leftists and all the radicals in Poland were calling for Poland to be independent from Russia. Right? That was the main thing that young Polish activists wanted. They hated Russia. They hated the Russian Empire. They were for independence. Rosa Luxemburg wrote her academic thesis saying that actually there was not a strong case for Polish independence. And she argued, based on years of meticulous research, that the economy of Russia and the economy of Poland were integrated with each other, and that it would not be in Poland's economic interest to have independence from Russia. And she argued instead that Russia and Poland should have a revolution together and move toward socialism together, and that breaking Poland away from Russia would not be economically prosperous. And she broke with what was trendy among radicals, hating Russia, hating those Russians. All right, that was what was trendy among young Polish activists. And she did her homework and she did the research, and she said, no, actually, we should want a revolution in Russia and in Poland. And that, no, I'm not going to go along. I know it's trendy. I know we all, that's a big trendy thing, this nationalist, Polish nationalism. She rejected Polish nationalism. And what's interesting is Lenin disagreed with her. A lot of people disagreed with her. But now it looks like Russian President Vladimir Putin says that she was correct, right? That actually the seeds of nationalism planted by the Bolsheviks led to the nations of what was formerly the Russian Empire being separate from each other. And as a result of that, the fall of the Soviet Union happened, and that part of the world, the landmass of Eurasia, right? You talk about Russia, Georgia, Moldova, Lithuania, Latvia, right? Ukraine. They're better when they're together. And Rosa Luxemburg, despite being Polish herself, and despite being of Jewish descent, it wasn't too good for Jewish folks to live in the Russian Empire back then. She did the math and she said, no, I'm not going to go along with what's trendy, right? All the young activists, all the young Marxists were protesting for Polish independence. We want Poland to break away from Russia. And she said, no, that will economically not benefit us. I'm actually arguing that Poland and Russia are better together and we should fight together. That was her position. A brilliant, brilliant young woman and a brave woman, right? Not only did she have the courage to go against Russia, the Russian Empire, and believe in Marxism, but she had the courage to go against the Marxist movement and oppose Polish independence. Brilliant, brilliant woman. Brilliant, brilliant woman. Rosa Luxemburg, a brilliant academic economist of the Marxist variety. Rosa Luxemburg developed a theory of imperialism, right? At the time, capitalism was changing how it operated, right? It was no longer the rule of corporations and no longer the rule of the individual factory owner and the individual worker. It was the rule of big corporations and monopolies. And Lenin wrote his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. She wrote her book, Accumulation of Capital. and she developed her own theory of imperialism. And she argued that Lenin underestimated it. And she said that Lenin said imperialism, the imperialist stage of capitalism, started in 1890. She said it had been around much longer. And that she argued that what we now call imperialism began in the period of colonialism. And she had a slightly different understanding of the imperialist stage of capitalism. I don't know who is right. At this point, I draw from Henry Charles Carey and his theory of the English system versus the American system. I draw from Lenin and his theory of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. I draw from Dugin and the geopolitical school that talks about civilizations of the land and empires of the sea. And I want to learn more about her theory of the accumulation of capital and how she argued that colonialism and what we now call imperialism was rooted in the foundations of capitalism and colonialism. I find that to be fascinating. So she developed her own theory of imperialism. She was just an exceptionally brilliant person, an exceptionally brilliant writer, and one of the most respected minds of the European Marxist movement. And the biggest Marxist party in the world at that time, biggest political party in the world, was the German Social Democrat Party. So Rosa Luxemburg moved to Germany and they hired her, and she was the head of education for the German Social Democratic Party. And she taught Marxist economics to people all across Germany. And all kinds of crazy things happened. First of all, she developed a theory of the mass strike. She argued that a strike that's led by a labor union is in and of itself not radical enough. But she noticed that there were what they called mass strikes that were taking place, where a strike that's led by a labor union, suddenly the whole population gets involved. And that she wrote a whole book about this mass strike phenomenon. When, regular strikes, or you have a labor union in a factory that goes on strike against the employer. But she talked about how in places where you have almost a big uprising, what starts out as one labor union going against one employer turns into what she calls the mass strike phenomenon, where a whole city rebels, right? And the mass strike phenomenon, she talked about that. And she was very, very opposed to German imperialism. And as World War I was getting together, as Germany was becoming more and more militarized, she emphasized that the Social Democratic Party of Germany should focus on opposing war and militarism. And that was not a popular position. The guy who was the head of the German Social Democratic Party was the bigwig, the head of Marxism at the time, the head of the most prominent international Marxist was a guy named Karl Kautsky. And Karl Kautsky developed this theory of ultra-imperialism. He said there would never be any more imperialist rivalries because the imperialist countries would form a cartel like the big banks, and there wouldn't be any rivalries between them, and they would just kind of respect each other and colonize the third world. It was his theory of ultra-imperialism. Rosa Luxemburg said the opposite. She said all this military spending is going to lead to a giant war. And she said World War I is going to happen and we need to agitate against war. And Karl Kautsky said, no, there's not going to be any war. Yeah, there's a lot of military spending and all that, but that's just theater. They're going to form a cartel. They're all getting along with each other. The Americans, the British, and the French, and the Germans, they're not going to fight each other. Don't worry about it. She was raising the alarm based on her understanding of the economics of capitalism, of the accumulation of capital, of imperialism, and how it operated in her time. She understood that there was a big war coming, and she raised the alarm, warning about war. And one thing that she did is she tried to encourage people not to go into the German army, not to fight in the German army. And so she went around talking about the abuse that soldiers were subjected to, right? Soldiers were not given proper food. Soldiers were flogged and tortured. She went around promoting that. And so they arrested her. This is long before World War I ever happened. They arrested her for defaming the army. And so she had a free speech trial. And at her free speech trial, she got hundreds of former soldiers to come and testify about the abuse that went on in the German military and how miserable it was to be a soldier in the German military. Amazing. And they thought that they would silence her by prosecuting her for defaming the army. But instead, what they did was they enabled her to have an even bigger platform. Her defense was, what I'm saying is true. And hundreds of people came and testified about the abuse they endured in the German military, and she was acquitted. Amazing. Rosa Luxemburg, just this amazing, dynamic woman. Just an amazing, amazing person. And then World War I broke out. And when World War I broke out, the Social Democratic Party betrayed its pledge. And they supported the war. They'd pledged they would never support a capitalist war. Never, never, never. And they sold out. And she was furious. And she refused to support World War I. And so they threw her in prison. And she was locked in a women's prison in Germany. And while she was in prison, she wrote the Junius pamphlet, a beautiful anti-war manifesto. That's where this quote comes from. At the beginning, she warned. She said that the war was rooted in the needs of the capitalist system, the crisis of overproduction, and the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And she said that wars like this were going to become more and more and more frequent, and as the needs of and it would lead to Europe going the way of the Roman Empire. And she wrote her pamphlet. She didn't sign it because she didn't want to go to prison, right? It was illegal to publish anti-war literature. So her pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet, The Crisis of Social Democracy, calling out and exposing the fraudulent Social Democratic Party for going along with the war, condemning Kautsky and Schneiderman and Ebhardt and the leaders of the German Social Democratic Party for claiming to be anti-war and claiming to be socialist and then supporting an imperialist war, and exposing the economic foundations of World War I, what World War I was really about. She understood economics. She was an economist. And this pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet, made a huge impact. And after she got out of prison, she went to Switzerland. Switzerland was a neutral country, right? And that's where all the socialist leaders that opposed the war and had to flee went. Lenin moved to Switzerland, and the Italian socialists moved to Switzerland. And all the people that opposed, the big anti-war people, to avoid going to prison in Europe, while Europe was experiencing one of the most horrendous wars in history, World War I, they all went to Switzerland, which was the neutral country. And in Switzerland, at a place called Zimmerwald, they gathered and they formed an anti-war bloc, the Zimmerwald movement. I'll show you a picture of the Zimmerwald meeting. They gathered at this little hotel in Switzerland called Zimmerwald. Right? This is a picture of them. There's Lenin. There's Rosa Luxemburg. They gathered at Zimmerwald. They signed the Zimmerwald Manifesto. It's not very many of them. Is there even 20 people in that picture? Small group of people, but there's the Russians and the British and the Italians. There they are at Zimmerwald. This is the hotel they met at, the little tiny hotel, right? Here, I'll put it on here. This is the hotel, the little tiny hotel they met at. Whatever comes up on the screen. Right? This is the hotel in the mountains. They gathered at this hotel and they wrote the Zimmerwald Manifesto opposing World War I. Rosa Luxemburg went back to Germany, continued doing anti-war activism, and they threw her in prison again. And Lenin was living there in Switzerland, and one day he got a knock on his door. And the knock on his door was from Alexander Parvus. Alexander Parvus was Lenin's old friend who had stabbed him in the back, a Russian-born Marxist socialist who had moved to Germany and gotten elected to the parliament and supported World War I. Lenin hated Parvus. Parvus had betrayed. Parvus had sold out and supported World War I. And Lenin hated Parvus and had written furious things about Parvus. But Parvus knocked on Lenin's door as a member of the German parliament, but also as a German intelligence officer, a member of the secret police. This is Parvus, right? We'll put Parvus on the screen here. As a member of the German secret police, Alexander Parvus said, "Look, Lenin, I know you're mad at me, I know you hate my guts. I know we don't agree with each other. I support Germany in the war, and you're anti-war, and you think I'm a big sellout and a traitor. But I can help you get back to Russia. You know, I wouldn't appreciate any anti-war activism in Germany, but if you took some of your anti-war activism back to Russia, that might help us in the war. And we can offer you a very, very large sum of money. And we can offer you a sealed train car so no one will notice that you're coming. And you can go back to Russia with a big wad of cash. And why, you can do a whole bunch of anti-war activism in Russia, lead some strikes. Maybe you can even break away some of the nationalities. Maybe you can get the Ukrainians to be independent. Maybe you can get the Moldovans to be independent. Maybe you can get the Georgians to be independent. You can start like nationalist movements to break apart Russia. How does that sound, Lenin? You think you can do that? Lenin said, sure, I'll take you up on it. Yeah, fine. That's what you want. And Lenin shook hands with his old enemy, Alexander Parvis, and he got on a train. And he went to St. Petersburg. And the rest is history, folks, because out of what Lenin did, you got the Soviet Union. Right? And it kind of was the opposite of what Alexander Parvis had wanted. Alexander Parvis had hoped Lenin would break apart Russia with nationalist movements. And what actually happened was that great Russia emerged as the Soviet Union under Stalin. But that's a whole nother thing. So what happened to Rosa Luxemburg? Well, Rosa Luxemburg went back to Germany and did more anti-war activism, and they threw her in prison. And she was in prison. And then World War I ended. And World War I ended, and the Germans epically lost. They lost. They signed an armistice on the land, and then the Kaiser ordered the Navy to go die, to do one last attack and just have the Navy all just die. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. And on the Navy ships, the rank and file soldiers overthrew their officers, and the sailors seized control of the ships. And pretty soon, the soldiers in the German army were rising up and overthrowing their officers. And there was a state of revolution happening all throughout Germany in 1918. November of 1918 is when World War I ended. And there was a revolutionary crisis. The Kaiser stepped down. People were rebelling. The army was in a state of revolt. And as that was happening, they let Rosa Luxemburg out of the jail. And a revolt started spreading through Germany. And as she got out of the jail, Rosa Luxemburg formed a new Marxist organization called the Spartacus Bund, or the Spartacus League, after Spartacus, the slave of Rome, this Roman slave rebel. And she formed the Spartacus Bund. And they had a founding meeting, and she announced, we're forming a new revolutionary organization, and that we're going to create a socialist Germany for the working class. And people in Germany were rallying around her and supporting her, and the country was in a state of upheaval. So what happened? Well, the social democratic leaders, the same ones who had sold out and supported World War I, they went to the military, to the people in the military that were still loyal, the Freikorps, they were called, these right-wing militias, right, that were formed, that were against the communists and didn't agree with the surrender, right, wanted to keep fighting in World War I. And the Social Democrats sent the Freikorps to crush the Spartacus revolt. And they moved into the area where they were, and she was taken away in the middle of the night, disappeared, interrogated, and then shot in the head. And they weighted her body with stones, and they threw it in the river. And that was the death of Rosa Luxemburg. And Rosa Luxemburg, when the Communist International was formed, the Comintern was formed, the very opening of the Comintern, Vladimir Lenin opened the Comintern with a moment of silence in honor of Rosa Luxemburg, the finest adherent of the Third International and its policies. All right, Rosa Luxemburg is a fascinating historical figure. And she understood economics on a very high level, and that she's unfairly represented. The reason that there's a lot of people who like her is they like her because she criticized the Bolsheviks. She criticized Lenin. But if you read her criticism of Lenin, she's basically saying that Lenin's theory of the party of new type wouldn't work. Wouldn't work in Germany. Right? And that she had written about the mass strike. You need kind of spontaneity to be, but she was in a different country. Lenin's theory of the party of new type was a very Russian formulation. She, on the other hand, was organizing in Germany, a country that was far more industrialized, that had different traditions and all of that. And she's not saying Lenin's a bad guy, and she's not saying Lenin's an evil dictator. She's just saying that the amount of control that the Bolsheviks wanted to exercise over their revolutionary organization and the centralization that Lenin's theory of the party of new type put forward, that would suppress creative revolutionary energy. And that perhaps she was right. I don't know, right? She had criticism of the Bolshevik organizational formulations. And on the national question, she disagreed with the thesis of supporting oppressed nations, right? She argued that trying to promote nationalism, you should just have workers' solidarity. She was against nationalism. And that was based on her experience in Poland, where she opposed the Polish nationalist movement. And she saw that it was not in Poland's economic interest to break away from Russia, and that Poland and Russia should have had socialism together, is what she argued in her pamphlet. And that was based on her experience. So it's a complex issue. It's a complex issue. Rosa Luxemburg gets highlighted by a lot of people who like her because she died. She never established a socialist government. After she died, some other communists in Germany established the Bavarian Soviet Republic, which, lasted about a year, and it was like a civil war. It was a disaster, Red Bavaria or whatever, but she was not part of that. She was dead already. She died, and she had written against Lenin, right? She'd criticized the vanguard party theory of Lenin. So a lot of people like her because she was a woman, right? So that means that she's woke and that, she's not an evil, sexist white male. She's a woman because she died before she took power, and she disagreed with Lenin and called, Lenin's party a new type authoritarian. So there's a lot of people that romanticize Rosa Luxemburg for that reason, but they don't actually read her work, right? They're attracted to the idea of her because they want to be democratic socialists and not like the Soviet Union, because they like the idea of a woman, right? Who's not a white man. She's a woman. They like the idea, but they don't really engage with her. She was a genius economist, a real believer in human creative power, and she was obsessed with ancient Rome, right? Roman history, the history of ancient Rome. She named her pamphlet, the one she put out. She couldn't put her name, so she signed it Junius, after the Roman general. She called her group the Spartacus Bund, or the Spartacus League. This quote about desolation, depopulation, a great cemetery. She was obsessed with ancient Rome, right? That's Rosa Luxemburg. Rosa Luxemburg is a really important figure. And because of the book I just wrote, and then because of another project that I'm working on, shout out to David Fox, it's right behind that, I've had to dig into a lot of Rosa Luxemburg's work. And as I dig into it, I'm impressed. I'm impressed, and I'm annoyed by how she's been misrepresented. The woke feminist LGBT left wants to glorify her. They don't understand what she was about. And actually, one person who really liked her was Lyndon LaRouche, Lynn Marcus and the National Caucus of Labor Committees. Back when the LaRouche movement were still calling themselves Marxists, they promoted Rosa Luxemburg's writings quite a bit. And, because she had some very, very brilliant understanding. And again, it's about economics, right? Economics gets lost. The woke left is not interested in economics. They are interested in the aesthetic of rebellion. They are interested in the emotion of the red flag, libidinal and Oedipal impulses. They're not interested in economics. Rosa Luxemburg understood economics. It was her understanding of economics that told her that World War I was coming, and that opposing World War I should be the focus, opposing militarization should be the focus. It was our understanding of economics that had her, understand that Polish independence was not going to lead to anything good for Poland, right? She had an understanding of economics, and that's why Rosa Luxemburg was important. And that who killed Rosa Luxemburg? The Marxists, the socialists. She wasn't killed by capitalists. She was killed by Marxists. The same group of people that run the synthetic left of Germany, the DSA of Germany, killed Rosa Luxemburg, right? Karl Kautsky, who said, oh, we don't have to worry about World War I. I've got this theory of ultra-imperialism. Schneiderman, Ebert, Nosk. The DSA of Germany killed Rosa Luxemburg. Let me repeat that. The DSA of Germany killed Rosa Luxemburg, not Hitler. Hitler wasn't around for another 20 years. Not Hitler, not the conservatives, not the church. The DSA, the Democratic Socialists, the Social Democrats, that always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. They talk a nice game about, oh, we want this and we want that. And I am Bernie Sanders. I want jobs for everyone, but we must support Israel. We've got to support Israel, and we've got to have a war with Vladimir Putin because he's a dictator. Look, I'm Bernie Sanders, and I always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. Sure, I can give a good speech about jobs and healthcare, but I always find a way to be on the side of the imperialists. I'm just like Karl Kautsky. I'm just like Eberhard and Schneiderman. I am a social democrat, social imperialist, lying piece of shit. That's what I am, folks. That's why I'm rallying working people to want a war with Russia. That's why I didn't fight when they stole the election from me in 2016 and 2020. I am Bernie Sanders, and I am a social democratic, social imperialist. That's what I am. That's what I am. And that's the people who killed Rosa Luxemburg, the Social Democrats. The Social Democrats killed Rosa Luxemburg because she wasn't one of them. She wasn't part of their little club that manages socialism for German imperialism. She was somebody who actually believed in these principles and actually understood the tendency of the falling rate of profit and capital accumulation and all this stuff. Right? There's always a bourgeois labor party. There's always a group of fake socialists. That's the point that Lenin makes in his important pamphlet, Imperialism, the Split in Socialism. Capitalism in its imperialistic monopolist stage doesn't work without socialists. If we actually implemented the free market libertarian policies that libertarians want, capitalism would fall apart. All right? You need fake socialists, social democrats to run imperialism. And we're not interested in joining their little club and being in the back of the room and shouting, ooh, ooh, pick me, pick me. We're not interested in that. We want to go lower and deeper to the real masses. That's what we want to do. All right? The struggle to defeat imperialism won't be a struggle in spite of them. It will be a struggle against them. Do not doubt it. We're not on the same team. We're not part of the same movement. We want something fundamentally different than they want. They want imperialism to work more effectively. We want a government of action that fights for working families. We want this economic system to be dismantled. We want a new economic order where human labor power and human creativity is recognized as the source of all wealth, and the government invests in enabling economic growth and expansion. They want to manage the degrowth of capitalism. That's what they want to do. They want to manage it. We want growth under an anti-monopoly government, a government of action that fights for working families. And these are fundamentally different. And it might sound the same, right? We want jobs for everybody. They want jobs for everybody. We want healthcare. They want healthcare. Yeah, they want to offer these things as a way to get you to accept their degrowth and their wars and make imperialism function. We want these things as part of building a mass movement to completely break apart and restructure the American economy to be part of the rising new world. These are fundamentally incompatible. And they know we're the enemy, right? The People's Forum in New York City. It's run by the party of sellout liberals, the PSL. It's run by the people like that. And the day after, when it first opened, CPI hadn't even been formed yet. We were Students and Youth for a New America. And we would go there and leave our literature. And the security guard would always say, you can't do that. And would give us a phone number. Well, if you want to leave literature, you have to call this phone number. And we call the phone number, and there would never be any answer. It'd be like an answering machine that never got back to us. They know we're the enemy. They know we're the enemy. All right. That's why when I went to Minneapolis, there were 15 nut jobs protesting outside of the CPI workshop. We had a small workshop put together by Penny in Minneapolis, and there were 15 of these woke creeps outside screaming about us being a cult. Right? There's a reason, right, that the Communist Party published a smear piece on their website against the Center for Political Innovation. They don't do that. They just ignore all the other communist groups. But we were so much of a threat, so much the enemy, they had to publish a smear piece on their website. I'm still proud of this smear piece. They published it. They quoted this book, the City Builders book, in it, right? They quoted this book, and I will show you, right? It's amazing, right? Nobody has ever gotten this level of you are important from the Communist Party. But the Communist Party was so scared of Caleb Maupin, right? They even have a Caleb Maupin section on their website. I kid you not, right? They have a Caleb Maupin section. You go to CPUSA, they even have a special like Caleb Maupin section that leads to this article. Now, I am not making this up, right? This is how scared they are of us, right? Socialism in America and the left is run by Satan. This is the Caleb Maupin section on the Communist Party website, why you're supposed to hate me. That's how important I am, right? Socialism in America is run by Satan. It is run by Satan. It is run by a group of people that want degrowth, that think that overpopulation is a big problem and want depopulation. It's run by a group of people who think Russia is a bigger threat and want to destroy Russia. It's run by a group of people that pander to the Democratic Party. It's run by a group of people that want gun control to disarm the working class. It's run by a group of people that supported the COVID lockdowns that destroyed people's lives. It's run by a group of people that think if you question transgenderism and say, geez, I don't know about women's sports, that you deserve to be murdered and killed. It's run by some pretty evil people, right? And there's no way to put it any other way. It's run by satanic forces. And those forces have seen that the real forces of truth in this world, like me, right? Look at the video of me with Russian President Putin. He's a real anti-imperialist leading a real country, Russia, against the globalist imperialist system. Putin likes me. They hate Putin. Look at the video of me with Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi, right? Again, the leader of an anti-imperialist country. Look at what I've done as I've traveled around the world. Look at us in the streets talking about Ibrahim Traore. We're on the side of righteousness. We are on the side of the pro-growth, emerging anti-monopoly coalition around the world. These people are on the side of woke imperialism. They are on the side of bombs that have rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter painted on them. They're evil people. And these are the people that killed Rosa Luxemburg, right? And they hate us because we believe what they're supposed to believe, right? What these people purport to believe is what we actually believe. And we have an economic program to rally America's working families to fight for this. And that is why they hate us, right? And that's the first thing you learn, right? If you join any communist group in America, the first thing they tell you, I'm not exaggerating, is there's this guy out there named Caleb. He's bad. And they can't ever tell you why I'm bad. I'm bad. The reason changes every week. I'm bad because I believe in patriotism. Well, that's funny, right? That's always been a part of Marxism. I'm bad because I met Alexander Dugin, who's supposedly a Marxist or supposedly a fascist. He's not a fascist. I'm bad because I'm a rapist. I've never raped anybody, and that's obvious. I'm bad because I run a cult. I mean, CPI is a pretty open group. We let people do what they want to do. We're pretty freewheeling. I'm bad because there's just some reason Caleb's bad. Caleb's bad. I'm bad because I'm not a fraud like they are. That's why I'm bad. And that's why they're terrified of me. And I'm exposing their scam, right? They're thieves caught in the act, right? The worst thing that the imposter can ever handle is when the real person walks in. Well, I'm telling you, how many people have done what I've done and been where I am? I've videotaped police brutality acts and gotten young African-American women acquitted in court, right? I have risked my life in humanitarian missions, delivering medical aid to Yemen. I have published more books than these people can ever imagine. I have put on seminars and organized events. I've confronted Saw Ing-wen, the so-called president of Taiwan, on the streets of New York City. You name what I have done, right? I've spoken to thousands of trade unionists at the Trade Union Congress of Brazil. I am the real deal, folks, right? And as much as you might blow up some imposter, some rich kid from California, you might blow him up, some rich kid who doesn't even know what imperialism is and can't explain basic, Marxist economic concepts. As much as you try to cover this up with social media, as much as you defame me and lie about me, the truth is the truth. I am the real deal. I am the real deal. And through working with me, you can be empowered. Look at Noah, right? Look at Noah. He's a young member of our group, right? And we have enabled him to give talks. We have enabled him to go to Russia and meet the Russian president. We have enabled him to start his own YouTube channel. He's making great videos. Look at Penny, right? Penny is a woman in Minneapolis. She gave a great speech about how she was looking for answers, and now she's out there, building this organization and traveling across the country, soon to be traveling around the world. I mean, you look at how we empower people. We believe in human creative power, right? And we do it, and we're the real deal. Go to the CPI website and look at everything we've done, observing elections in Nicaragua, observing elections in Russia. We're the real deal, right? We're the real deal. And we have enough common sense to realize that communism is the private property of some shitty entities, and that what Americans think communism is not attractive, and that we have taken the innovationist turn to build a new movement. That's what we're doing. We're building a new movement. We're organizing. We're going lower and deeper to the real masses. We're not begging for a place in leftism. We're not begging for a place in communism. Look, there was a Palestine conference in October, and we went to it, and we brought thousands of copies of our book about the Houthis. We paid to get in. We went in, and we left the books everywhere, and the PSL thugs escorted us out. Really, I mean, we're pro-Houthi. We're on their side. We support the Palestinians, but PSL is so scared of us, they removed us. But then this other communist party, this other influencer brand, they showed up, and did they pass out any books? No. Did they do anything? No. They just took selfies of themselves, and they tried to get close to Hassan Piker so they could get pictures with Hassan Piker, because they're not a real group. They're an influencer brand, right? And what they were there to do, they weren't there to preach anti-imperialism and challenge the phonies who ran it and build a real organization. They were there to beg for a place in leftism. And that's what they did. They went to the event, and they stood in the back going, please, call on me. Please call on me. I want to be seen with Hassan Piker. Can I get seen with Hassan Piker? They're begging for a place in leftism. They want to be part of leftism. We don't want to be part of leftism. We want to go lower and deeper to the real masses. Lower and deeper to the real masses. Begging for a place in leftism is pathetic, right? They want to be AOC's poodle. They want to be Hassan Piker and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's poodle. We went there with a book about who the Houthis are, and we left it there, and we were escorted out by PSL thugs. And then we left that book at a local mosque, at a number of local mosques, and we left that book at a number of hotels where delegates were staying, and we visited local Shia Muslim community members there that are anti-imperialist and sympathetic with the Islamic Revolution of Iran, and then we drove back to New York. All right? We got shit to do. We're in the streets for Ibrahim Traore. We're in the streets for opposing war with Russia. We're in the streets when Putin met with Trump. We were in the streets promoting it. We're doing the real work. We're doing the real work. We're doing it. We're the real deal, right? You read our book on the Houthis, we're the real deal, right? You look at the work that we did. Look at the end of the year video that CPI did. We're the real deal. There's a lot of frauds out there. There's a lot of phonies out there. There's a lot of insincere people out there. We're the real deal. And don't you doubt it. And that presentation I just gave you about Rome, that lays out and explains to you the situation that we're in. We are from the tradition of Rosa Luxemburg. We're also from the tradition of Malcolm X. We're from the tradition of Ho Chi Minh. We're from the tradition of Khomeini. We're from the tradition of Ibrahim Traore. We're from the tradition of Daniel Ortega. We're from the tradition of all the anti-colonial fighters. We're also from the tradition of Abraham Lincoln. We're also from the tradition of Franklin Roosevelt. We incarnate anti-imperialism and anti-revisionism when it really gets down to it. Anti-revisionism, right? Revisionism is an attempt to fit socialism into the Western imperialist system. That's what revisionism has always been, from the time of Edward Bernstein to the time of Kautsky to the time of Khrushchev. People who try to take socialist thought and fit it into imperialism, that's what revisionism is. It's not straying from Marx, right? You know, Lenin strayed from Marx, Stalin strayed from Marx, Deng Xiaoping strayed from Marx. Revisionism is an attempt to create a socialism that is compatible with imperialism. We are anti-revisionists. And my new book that should be available pretty soon will go into great detail about the struggle against revisionism, particularly within American communism, and what it really stood for, the geopolitics, the civilizations of the sea versus the civilizations of the land, thalassocracy versus the people of the land fighting back. We incarnate anti-revisionism. We are the anti-revisionists. We are the Lincolnists, right? We are what the Trade Union Unity League and the sharecroppers unions of the 1930s were. We are what the struggle to oppose the Vietnam War was all about. We are anti-revisionism. The innovationist movement that celebrates human creativity, that seeks to build a movement that empowers and unleashes people and pushes them forward to do great things. That's what we are. Folks, there is a thinking stuff from which all that exists comes. All that exists is within the same substance, the same thinking stuff. And that same thinking stuff that all that exists seeks to express itself. And we all must struggle to find a way to let that thinking stuff express itself through us, express itself through our actions, through our work. Let the thinking stuff from which all things are made, let God express himself. Let the light of God and the light of righteousness spread from within us. Let us be a vessel for this light to come into the world. Let the thinking stuff, the creative stuff from which all things are made, let it express itself through you. Be a vessel through which the light of God and the light of righteousness can extend itself into the universe and lead us all to a higher plane toward the mode of existence, the ideal way of being that was the original plan all along. Right? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "You are the light of the world, but a city on a hill cannot be hidden. So let your light shine." I am here to tell you that innovationism is a movement that understands what that light is and wants to help you find the light within yourself and let that light shine before the world. We understand the source of human creative power. We understand the problems of the world we're in, and that everywhere in this world is trying to stomp that light out of you. And we are saying, let that light shine. Let the light shine. Let the light shine before man. That's what we're here to say. So if you like what we're about, want to get involved, join the Center for Political Innovation. Let's do the roll call. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Jenny in Cincinnati. La Senora in Los Angeles. John in Florida. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Ryan in Kansas City. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Chimwalk from Los Angeles. Carolyn and Dario in Brooklyn. Ellie in Sacramento, California. Good to see you. Eli. I think it's Eli, right? Eli, right? Patch in Arizona. Anthony in Detroit. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Irene in New York City. Good to see you, Irene. Right? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Dan in LA. Good to see you, Dan. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? God is everywhere. Amen to that. Amen to that. Wallace Wattles. Wallace Wattles. The Science of Being Great. The Making of a Man Who Can. A great socialist, a friend of Eugene Debs, composed these beautiful books that have really just helped me to keep going in a world full of so much demoralizing energy. I love Wallace Wattles. And that a lot of the stuff that's come since then, like The Secret and all that, is cringe as hell. I get it. The manifesting and all that. If you don't attach it to socialism and you don't attach it to wanting economic justice, right? If you just make it this like, oh, I'm going to get rich with my mind by envisioning things, you're missing the point. Wallace Wattles is amazing and has done so much. I listen to Wallace Wattles all the time, think in a certain way. But without Wallace Wattles, the kind of like, cheesy, manifesting or whatever is pretty bad. I admit it. So, but Wallace D. Wattles, the socialist New Thought, has really, really helped me. Has really, really helped me. The universe is all that is everyone and everything. Amen to that, Dan. Amen to that. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made. That we all must learn to think in a certain way. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? All right. Now, I've got 2 questions that have come in. Oh, actually, I've got 3 questions that have come in. So I've got 2 Rumble rants and I've got 1 coffee. I've got 1 coffee and 2 Rumble rants. So what I'm going to do is I feel like I should put on, just because I was talking about everything that CPI has done, I'm going to put on the end of the year video that I did, about everything we did in 2025. And while that's playing, you all will send more questions for me to answer, which will be awesome. And I will then answer those questions before I go to bed. It's a little bit after midnight here, but I'm feeling particularly energized. I don't know why. We just had a great CPI meeting. And so that's what we'll do. So please send more questions. It would be appreciated. I do need something to talk about in the second half of the show. We got 3 questions lined up already, but if you want to send more questions, the best way to send them is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. So send me a question, something for me to talk about in the second half of our show. And I'm going to put on our end of the year video so you see everything that CPI did this year and did last year. And then after that, I'll answer questions and then we'll call it a night. So here's the end of the year video, 2025, our 2025 video. So yes, send questions, buy me a coffee, send me a question. We'll put this on and then I will answer questions. So there we go. Who knows? If you guys send a lot of questions, I might even cut this short. You can still see it. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on the CPI website. But, maybe you guys will send so many questions, I'll have to cut this short. So go to buy me a coffee. Send me some questions. Here we go.
The Center for Political Innovation.
The Center for Political Innovation.
The Center for Political
We are the Center for Political
The Center for
Innovation.
Political Innovation.
We are the Center for Political
The
Innovation.
Center for Political
The
Innovation.
Center for Political Innovation.
We are the Center for Political Innovation. How do we even begin to describe the activities of the Center for Political Innovation in the year of 2025 and what this year meant for our movement? So much has gone on. Our post-pandemic culture has trained a lot of people to just kind of hide in their internet bubble and listen to podcasts. People remain isolated, only hearing people that they agree with and being polarized against each other, fighting over cultural issues. But the Center for Political Innovation exists to break people out of this artificial bubble with constant outreach, coming together, learning to be brothers and sisters as we carry out operations to promote anti-imperialism and our vision for a new America. We are an organization of go, 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 activism, bringing the message to the people and building a solid community. So, how do we sum up the year of 2025? Well, we could start with the numbers. Hundreds of people attended our convention that took place in Chicago. Hundreds more attended our workshops around the country or participated in the demonstrations and protests and national days of action that we organized in cities across the country as well. In addition to that, over 3,000 copies of our book, Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For, were distributed across the country. Thousands more copies of our newly published books were sold. Thousands of people saw us in the streets of Chicago, New York City, and Los Angeles with our banners and our messages. Thousands more watched us on international media, whether it was my interviews on Iranian television, whether it was the interviews that were given by our members about hands-off Venezuela, whether it was the speeches that were given by myself and other members who participated in international gatherings, or whether it was the radio interviews I did regularly on WBAI NYC radio promoting anti-imperialism. We were getting out the message, and thousands of people in this country became familiar with the anti-imperialist, pro-working families message because of the work of the Center for Political Innovation. Now, in the next section of this video, I am going to go over everything we did in the year of 2025. I'm going to give you a timeline, and I do warn you, it's a little bit long because we've done so much this year to promote anti-imperialism and to solidify our community. So get ready. This is everything we did in the past 12 months. On January 20th, we started off the year with an event marking Donald Trump's inauguration. The day of the inauguration, we were in the streets of Washington, D.C. with our two big banners, Only Peace Can Make America Great Again, and Build the Peace Bridge, highlighting the Bering Sea Tunnel connecting Russia to the United States via Alaska. And we distributed thousands of pamphlets to those attending Trump's inauguration in Capital One Arena. And that night, we had an event that took place at a nearby hotel with speeches, music, and all kinds of different messages highlighting anti-imperialism. On January 30th, I attended Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearings on Capitol Hill and watched her take questions from the Congressional Committee about her record as an anti-war activist and her efforts to make peace. On February 22nd, we had a workshop in Minneapolis. Now, this workshop was a little different than others because there were 15 protesters outside, accusing CPI of being a cult, screaming that we were too sympathetic to Russia, but that didn't stop us. And despite the fact that we faced some woke Antifa disruptions, we had a tremendous workshop and got to know and solidify our relationship with a lot of great people in the Minneapolis area. March 14th through 16th, John McCarthy represented us at the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Convention. John McCarthy was presented with an award for all that he had done to stand with the Uhuru movement and to connect the Uhuru movement and the Center for Political Innovation with each other throughout the process. On April 7th, as we were gathering in Chicago to start the process of building for the convention, we held a demonstration in Millennium Park. And at the demonstration, we emphasized no war against Iran, and we unfurled our banner and did quite a bit of outreach. It was a great way to kick off activities leading up to the convention. In the month of May, our member Jeff Young went and participated in the Great NATO Debate at Dayton Public Library, a debate about the role of NATO as the NATO summit and anniversary celebration was happening it was really great that a member of the Center for Political Innovation could be chosen as the anti-war voice. May 24th, we had an all-day workshop in Los Angeles themed around our booklet, Do You Believe in Growth? We had a lively Q&A discussion and solidified more relationships in the Los Angeles area. June 5th and 6th, I represented the Center for Political Innovation at the Global Digital Forum held in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia. And at the gathering, I had the opportunity to make a presentation to hundreds of anti-imperialist voices, telecommunications experts, and others from the African continent, from Asia, from countries like Vietnam and countries like South Africa, countries like North and South Korea. And I emphasized in my remarks that Western media was on the defensive, but now was the time to not fall into the manipulations and efforts to divide anti-imperialists using social media schemes. June 13th through 24th, as Israel and Iran were exchanging missiles, I was featured every night as a guest on Press TV, giving lengthy interviews, presenting the anti-war perspective to Iranian audiences. It was really an honor to be trusted enough to give an anti-war perspective at a time that Israel and Iran were in an active war situation. And it was really important that I was able to speak and represent the anti-war perspective coming from an American voice to the Iranian viewers who were watching their country be bombed. June 24th, we hit the streets of Chicago to honor Ibrahim Traore and to do educational work promoting this new African leader who's leading the Union of Sahel States. Now, the rally went viral in African media and was seen all over the world. It was a really big deal that people in America on the streets of Chicago were honoring Ibrahim Traore, the great African anti-imperialist. And we also received a phenomenal response from hundreds of Chicago residents who were walking by and took our leaflets and learned about the great African leader. July 12th, we had our national convention in Chicago, themed around working families first, defeat the deep state for a new world of peace and innovation. And it was quite a gathering. It was attended by over 260 people, and we gave awards to prominent guests. It was a tremendous step forward for our organization. On July 13th, we held the Chicago Sessions, a gathering for a lengthy Q&A in Chicago to discuss the future of the Center for Political Innovation. It was a great day as well. On July 15th, we gathered to have yet another rally to support Ibrahim Traore, this time on the streets of Rockford, Illinois, where we raised awareness and again received a very positive response. It was great to get out in the streets and do anti-imperialist educational work. August 7th, we co-signed an official letter to the United Nations from the Islamic Human Rights Commission of Iran, condemning Israel's crimes against the Palestinians and calling for international action to stop Israeli atrocities. On August 15th, members of CPI in 8 different cities participated in a national day of action to support the peace talks taking place in Alaska between Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. We raised the slogan, "We support peace talks, end Ukraine war," and we also made a point of thanking Tulsi Gabbard for her revelations about the Russiagate hoax that made it possible for Donald Trump and Putin to meet and take steps toward ending the Ukraine conflict. On August 25th, we published the book Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, which became an immediate smash hit success. It was #1 on Amazon in the category of radical political thought. And I did interviews about the book with Kim Iverson, Do Dissidents, and a number of other hosts. The book has received quite a positive reception as explaining the continuity between Trotskyite, petty bourgeois revisionism and the neoconservative bloodlust and war drive that has been guiding U.S. foreign policy. On August 29th, Noah and myself drove out to Detroit for the People's Conference for Palestine, where we distributed over 1,000 copies of the book, Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For? We went into the conference knowing that the PSL organizers would be hostile, and they were. We were removed by PSL thugs because they don't really support the Houthis, and they don't really support anti-imperialism, and they really didn't want our message to be heard. But that didn't stop us from getting thousands of books into the hands of pro-Palestine activists and showing them what a real anti-imperialist organization that doesn't tail after wokeness is really like. On September 19th, I was able to speak with Roger Waters, the Pink Floyd rock star, about his support for the Palestinians, as well as his support for the Houthis of Yemen. It was a dynamic conversation that was seen all over the world. Say something about the Yemenis and how the Yemeni people have stood with Palestine.
The Yemenis are, the Houthis. Their response to this has been quite remarkable. And when the USA pulls the full power of its army at them, they go, "We're doing the right thing," and they are. Standing with the people of Palestine is the right thing to do today. So we stand with the Houthis and with the people of Yemen, and we have done all the way through. So,
thank you.
All right. You're very...
On September 20th, Noah Shank represented the Center for Political Innovation at the World Youth Festival gathering in Russia, as well as at the Intervision International Songwriting Competition. Russia was banned from the Eurovision competition, so they launched their own, Intervision, and it was an amazing international event featuring artists from all across the world, and it was really great to have CPI represented there, with really the only American in attendance being Noah Shank of the Center for Political Innovation. On October 4th, we held yet another National Day of Action to support peace talks. This time, not only did we raise a call to negotiate with Russia and end the conflict in Ukraine, we also called for prosecuting John Bolton and the war makers who promoted the Russiagate hoax that marched us toward the war. On October 17th, I had the honor of attending a very important gala in Moscow to commemorate the founding of RT. It was held at the Bolshoi Ballet Theater in Moscow and was attended by George Galloway, former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, and other very important guests. It was really special that we, as an organization, could be represented at this very important international gathering to commemorate the rise of anti-imperialist media and alternative voices that challenge Western narratives. On October 18th, the Democratic Party called No Kings rallies around the country, and we decided to crash the show. We disrupted the No Kings rallies, saying hands off Venezuela. And in cities across the country, CPI was on the scene to bring an anti-war message to this Trump derangement syndrome foolishness that the Democratic Party had organized.
In America, solo el pueblo salva al pueblo. Only the people can save the people. We are the people that will repair, restore, and make this nation finally the place of belonging for all of us. Hands up, Maduro! Hands up, Venezuela! Hands up, Maduro! Hands up, Venezuela! Hands up, Maduro! As an indigenous Mexican, jobs and schools for us.
In Minneapolis, our members disrupted Keith Ellison as he spoke, as well as other Democratic Party officials. And in Los Angeles, our members were featured on the prominent No Jumper podcast, interviewed about why it's important to have solidarity with Venezuela. On October 24th, Kirill Dmitriev, the CEO of the Russia Foreign Direct Investment Fund, came to New York City to negotiate with the Trump administration. I was able to be there as one of those who greeted Dmitriev outside of his hotel. And that night, we organized a demonstration in Times Square to say Russia is not our enemy. We support peace talks. It was certainly exciting. On October 27th, we launched a national outreach campaign aimed at food banks across the country because, due to the government shutdown, at that point, 42 million Americans were poised to lose their food benefits. We went to food banks across the country, raising a message of anti-imperialism, explaining who our government really works for and what could be done if we had a government that actually worked in the interests of America's working families and not the Wall Street globalist imperialist system. On November 1st, the Center for Political Innovation was happy to join the Hands Off Uhuru annual Black is Back March. We were proud to join this rally that had been happening in Washington, D.C., outside the White House for the past 17 years as allies of the Uhuru movement. I was able to give a message at the press conference the day before and to speak at the actual rally outside the White House. It was very important to be there. On November 16th, the Center for Political Innovation was involved in organizing a rally in Times Square to support Dr. Hak Jahan, the Mother of Peace, a key figure in arranging for Donald Trump to visit North Korea in his first term, a key advocate of the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Dr. Hak Jahan is currently being held in detention as her trial goes on in South Korea on trumped-up bribery charges that are politically motivated. We were very happy to be involved in organizing this important rally to support a friend of North Korea and call for the release of an 82-year-old woman who has dedicated her life to advocating peace. On November 27th, CPI members in Minneapolis decided to mark the holiday by doing banner drops over a major highway. The banners said, "Hands off Venezuela," and "Jobs, healthcare, schools for America, not weapons for Ukraine." They also got together and had a meal and made plans to expand our activities in the Minneapolis area. On December 6th, CPI members in Los Angeles attended a Hands Off Venezuela demonstration, and they were actually featured on local TV as advocates in opposition to attacks on Venezuela, supporting the Venezuelan people and exposing the false claims about drug trafficking being used to target Venezuelan fishermen. Our members in LA have been doing relentless outreach, hitting the streets of Venice Beach, going to farmers markets, everywhere they can to raise an anti-imperialist message saying hands off Venezuela and opposing imperialism. They've gotten involved with local bookstores and been doing a huge amount of outreach. The LA branch certainly deserves credit for their relentless efforts to spread the message, as do the folks in Minneapolis who are constantly doing outreach. Our members are go, go, go. On December 13th, we were part of an important webinar by the Uhuru movement to launch a coalition to overturn the Foreign Agents Registration Act. This was a very, very important webinar because this campaign could open the door to a lot more security and protection of civil liberties for those of us who oppose war and want peace with anti-imperialist countries. We are very excited about the campaign that has been launched to overturn the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Why is it that at the end of every year I do a video like this and go over all the outreach and all the workshops and all the national days of action that we convene? It's because of the fact that out there are a lot of people who claim to agree with what the Center for Political Innovation stands for, who really don't do anything. We live in the age of podcasts and constant social media drama, but CPI is real. We are organizing people, we are meeting new people who would never go looking for this kind of message online, and we are training them to get to know each other and to organize and do real outreach. We are building an in real life activist project to promote anti-imperialism. And it's important. Many people in our society right now are feeling left behind and forgotten, and CPI has given them a place that they can belong while being educated about how we can struggle to build a new America. Now, we've got some big plans for the coming months. First of all, January 11th, we are kicking off the new year with a great event in New Jersey. It's going to be a spectacular event themed around the name Earth is Awakening, America Should Join. We'll be giving awards to 4 different important anti-imperialist activists. In addition to that, there will be speeches, music. Garland Nixon is attending. Some rather important international guests are going to be there. There's going to be a full dinner buffet. It's going to be a tremendous time. I hope that you register at the link down below and come to our event in New Jersey, because it's going to be a spectacular day with CPI members from around the country making plans to build, build, build. We're planning to have yet another national convention, this time once again in the Chicago area. We're picking the date of August 15th. The date is significant because it will be the anniversary of Trump and Putin's meeting in Alaska, which points toward an improved relationship and the transition of the United States toward joining the rising new economy around the world. we plan to convene a major anti-imperialist gathering in the heartland of America. We need you there on August 15th. Between now and August, we're planning a series of regional workshops in areas with active innovation circles so we can get to know local people and tell them about the organization and excite them about the upcoming convention. On March 15th, we're looking to have regional house parties for City Builders Day to tell the story of the assassination of Julius Caesar and what it means for us in the age of declining imperialism here in the United States of America. Themes for the upcoming year will be the important effort to overturn the Foreign Agents Registration Act and defend civil liberties. We also plan to focus on demanding that peace deal with Russia be signed and the Ukraine war come to an end. In addition to that, we plan to emphasize that China is not our enemy and that Israel does not work in the interests of America's working families, that Iran and the Yemeni people are not our enemies, and that solidarity with the people of the world in their struggle against the same big banks and corporations that are destroying the lives of American working families is essential. We're going to be doing lots of outreach, lots of education, and partnering with lots of different organizations to spread awareness and push the truth in difficult times. The end of the year is a great time to donate. At this point, we need money. All of these workshops, all of these educational outreach activities, they all require funds. And if you donate to CPI, you will be helping fund important anti-imperialist educational work. Now would be the time to send us an end-of-the-year contribution or to sign up to become a monthly contributor to the convention fund to help us have a convention on August 15th of 2026 that is even more successful than the one we held last year. Please donate at the link down below. Sponsor our activities. You will not be wasting your money by any means. We have lots of work to do. One of our focuses in the coming year will be on setting up shop, finding a location in the country where we can set up a community center and really complete our out of the movement to the masses mission and operating in the community and not being an internet niche for anti-imperialists, but rather being an organization that people in the community rely on while being educated about anti-imperialism. It's not easy to set up shop, but it is necessary. The clock is ticking and the flood waters are rising. The time for building and solidifying a base among the population is now. The storm is coming, and what I've referred to as strategic equilibrium could soon be the reality facing America. We have got to be prepared. It is time to set up shop in communities. The Center for Political Innovation has gone through multiple phases as an organization. We have been learning as we organize and build. The year of 2023 was the year of the comeback. We relaunched the organization and did some spectacular things. We sponsored the Rage Against the War Machine protests in Washington, D.C. and hosted Scott Ritter. We also had a great national convention in Portland, Oregon. The year of 2024 was a year of sharpening and solidifying our organization. There were some key organizational struggles that took place where we had to make clear we were no longer seeking to categorize ourselves as a communist organization, but instead having a more accurate orientation that reflected where the global anti-imperialist movement is currently at and what our vision for an America beyond globalism and imperialism, where human creativity is invested in and cultivated, would really be like. We also, in the year of 2024, launched a struggle against Khrushchevism because members of our organization had become infected with the kind of liberal thinking that makes organizing a serious organization in America almost impossible. We had to struggle against those who were enamored with internet personalities or too scared of being labeled a cult of personality to really get real work done. The innovationist turn took place in the year of 2024, and it was a great step forward organizationally, solidifying those who were with us. In the year of 2024, we also got to participate in the World Youth Festival and speak directly with the Russian president, and we played a very, very important role in the Uhuru trial and the proceedings that went on. We intervened in the U.S. election with our Peace MAGA campaign. The Kamala Harris book went viral. That was the year of 2024. Now, this year, 2025, has been the year of relentless struggle. This has been a year where we've been in the streets all over the country preaching anti-imperialism. Something very glorious is happening with our organization. As our strategy has become more clear to us, as our ranks have become more solidified, the optimism that flows from our members is becoming more and more apparent. People who interact with us can tell we have something very, very special, and we are filled with hope. Our organization is playing a vital and important role. And as there is hope for ending the conflict in Ukraine, as more and more Americans are waking up to the role of the Israel lobby and the hopelessness and fruitlessness of these endless wars, as there is a rising awareness that the greed of Wall Street shouldn't be the basis for our economy, the role of our organization is becoming more and more important. And our members are learning to work with each other and to be in solidarity with each other and to engage with people in ways they never have before. New people are trickling into our ranks. It's a very, very exciting time. The Center for Political Innovation is marching ahead. This has been a great year of huge successes for our organization. And in addition to that, it has been a moment where our role is becoming more and more vital and more important. So, if you can send us a contribution to help fund our activities, that would be great. And we'll see you in January in New Jersey. We'll see you in August in Chicago. And we hope that you can become a member and get involved in our activities. A lot of exciting things are happening. It's time to loudly scream from the heavens, Russia is not our enemy. China is not our enemy. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Dare to struggle, dare to win. The Center for Political Innovation is marching forward. Happy New Year. Yep, that's us. We're the real deal, folks. You can't deny it. But anyhow, so I gave people a chance to send more questions. It'd be great if people could send more questions. Keep me talking for a little while longer. And thank you. Yeah, I mean, we have to document what we do. We have to show people. People don't know how to be activists, right? People don't know you can do anything. And we show by example, but it needs resources. That's why I get on here and stream, and and that's why we need people to become members and do the $15 a month membership stuff. And it's why I need people to ask questions. And it's not easy to do what we do, but we do it. So dare to struggle, dare to win. All right, let's start answering questions. First question, someone said, I heard someone say the real reason the migrant issue gets Euros up their own ass is because the European birth rates and the white birth rates kind of make sense. And then he asked me about James Fishbeck blames foreign students for American students not getting into universities. Look, the James Fishbeck thing, that guy's a troll, right? I mean, that guy is completely manufactured, and he's just a candidate who's been manufactured to be a right-wing troll. The way he's waving his gun around, the way he's openly saying racist stuff, this is manufactured and made for social media. And it's like Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes supported kidnapping Maduro. Nick Fuentes is now telling everyone he loves Jeff Epstein and thinks he was so cool for what he did. Nick Fuentes is not a real dissident, right? There are people on the right, like Candace Owens, who, I don't agree with her, but she's sincere. Tucker Carlson, again, we disagree on some things, but he's sincere. Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, there are people on the right that probably disagree with a lot of what I say that are sincere. Nick Fuentes is not one of them. And this Fishbook guy, I mean, based on what I've seen, he just look, if you're preaching hatred for people on the basis of their ethnicity, that's not helpful, right? It's one thing to oppose Zionism, right? And oppose, the idea that Jews are so special and should rule over everybody else or something. That's one thing, right? But we have no beef with Jewish people and people of Jewish descent. We've got them in CPI. We got members. And the same goes for any other ethnic group, right? You shouldn't be preaching any racial or ethnic ideology. That's years of lead shit, right? If you've learned anything from my book on the danger of an American years of lead, America is very, very multiracial. And if you want to destroy America, you get every different race fighting every other race, right? Not helpful. It's one thing, the Uhuru movement is for black people, right? But they're doing black empowerment. They're not telling black people to go out and fight white people. Their slogan is unity through reparations. They're doing community projects, the Black Power Blueprint. They're not trying to foment a years of lead, right? And that there's a huge amount of that right now. Social media is being manipulated. This is part of their strategy to maintain the power of NATO, right? They are trying to foment a years of lead, right? They're trying, the years of lead in Italy, it was Operation Gladio. That's how they maintained control over Italy. When the Italian people wanted to break out of imperialism, wanted to break out of NATO, they fomented all kinds of crazy sectarian political violence. And that's why Italy is now a member of NATO. They're trying to do the same thing over here. And we have to oppose it and build a movement on optimism, growth, and coming together on an optimistic, constructive socialism aligned with the emerging new economy around the world. No years of lead in America, no racism, no chaos and political violence, uniting people around a real program to build, right? So there we go. Okay, and then a couple Rumble rants. What did you think of the Bad Bunny performance? Well, I talked about that a couple streams ago. I thought it was great. It was fine. My wife is, she's Latin American. She thought it was great. It meant a lot to her. I thought it was moving, very elaborate sets, all the different flags, honoring all the countries, including the countries we're supposed to hate, like Cuba and Nicaragua and Venezuela. And yeah, and the reason people are offended is because there is, from the woke people, there is this mantra of white people bad, Christians bad, America bad, and that they're on the defensive. A lot of people are on the defensive. And so they interpreted somehow that show, that Super Bowl halftime show, as saying, you're bad. That's not what it was saying. It was just celebrating Latin culture. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I thought it was great, and that these kinds of arguments are not productive. I think that if I was Trump, I would have arranged for that to be the Super Bowl halftime show so that he could then attack it the way he did. And whenever Trump gets called racist, he immediately gets a lot of support because there's a lot of people in the middle of America that are angry at being called racist. They take offense and they're tired of kind of the woke mantra that seems to them like you're bad. And so it appeals to them. And, the Epstein stuff is horrifying. And I mean, I'm kind of shocked that our political system can just kind of get back to normal after that. But, the culture war, red team, blue team, woke versus MAGA, it's a dead end. It's a dead end. It's just a complete dead end. And I view fighting over the Super Bowl halftime show is just, so what, right? They sang it in a different language. So what, right? Was it an FU to Trump? Yeah, kind of. But a lot of Americans don't like Trump. And a lot of Americans do. And so what? I mean, who cares? Who cares? Right. Different groups get highlighted at different times. So I'm not offended by it. And I just, whatever. It was a nice show. It was fun to watch. Not the language I speak. End of the world. Not the end of the world. And then the next Rumble rant question was, is Red Sun in the Sky a propaganda song for Mao Zedong? In line with the song, it says he turned people into owners. Red Sun in the Sky. I know the East is red. Is that the translation? From the red East rises the sun. Then in China appears Mao Zedong. He works for the people's welfare. Dun, 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 dun. Right? Is that the East is red? I don't know this other one. But that used to be, it's funny. The last line of the song, there's no translation of, right? It's like la 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 la. The last line of the song doesn't have any meaning. So it's like when I just went dun 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 dun, it actually has no meaning. I found out it's just like la 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 la, right? It's from the red East rises the sun. Then in China appears Mao Zedong. He works for the people's welfare, and then the rest is la 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 la. It was the national anthem of China during the Cultural Revolution. Now their anthem is a song that was popular during the anti-Japanese war during the Second World War, which Paul Robeson recorded in English, but his lyrics are not correct. Paul Robeson's version of it is a version that was like more acceptable to the American audience, right? I mean, I don't speak Chinese, but in English, Paul Robeson's version was, "Arise, all who refuse to be bond slaves. Stand up now and fight for liberty and true democracy." That's actually not what the lyrics are. The lyrics in Chinese are, "Arise," "Arise, all who refuse to be bond slaves. With our very flesh and blood, we will build the new Great Wall." Yeah, a little bit more exciting, right? Fight for liberty and true democracy. No. Yeah, with our very flesh and blood, we will build the new Great Wall. Damn, that's an epic national anthem, right? I don't know this song. Yeah, I don't know it. I don't know Red Sun in the Sky. I really like Chinese communist music. I will say that, right? Socialism is good. Socialism is good. Socialism is good. A socialist government works in the people's welfare, right? Right? And then without the Communist Party, without communists, there'd be no new China. Without communists, there'd be no new China. Communists, yeah, right. I like Chinese communist songs. They're very catchy. What they did is they actually took all the popular like folk songs in China at the time and they rewrote the lyrics to be about communism, right? So that's what they did. And that was one thing that they did at the Red Army camps is they were constantly singing. There was just like never a silent moment, and so, yeah, I don't know. You read about that, pretty good stuff. So, yeah, no, I don't know that particular song, but, there you go. All right. So, today is the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. There's been a number of videos of the celebrations. The people of Iran are going out into the streets this year in particular because of all the, there's an attempt to portray the Iranians as wanting to overthrow the government. Obviously, there's millions and millions and millions of people in the streets supporting the Islamic Republic. There's been a lot of videos that have come out. This is one video that came out for the anniversary. So I'm going to show this video. If anyone has any more questions, Rumble Rant works, but the best way to do it is buy me a coffee. I'm probably going to start wrapping it up since there don't seem to be any more questions, but any more questions would be appreciated. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. So, all right, let's do this video. This is like a video that came out for the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution.
یکی از بلاهای بزرگ امروز دنیا که هنوز تمام نشده و انشالله تمام خواهد شد نظام سلطه است. نظام سلطه یعنی دنیا تقسیم بشه به سلطه‌گر و سلطه پذیر. یه عده‌ای حتما بایستی قدرتمندانه حکمرانی کنن بر همه دنیا. کشورهای دیگه‌ای هم بایستی حالا زیر پوشش‌های مختلف از اینا اطاعت کنن. این نظام سلطه است. ما این نظام را این فرمول غلط را در دنیا به هم زدیم. ما نشون دادیم که نخیر. میتواند یک ملتی وجود داشته باشد که نه سلطه‌گر باشد و نه سلطه پذیر، نه خودش بخواد به کسی زور بگرد و نه زیر بار هیچ زورگویی برود. جمهوری اسلامی نظام جهانی ظالمانه رو به چالش کشید. علت مخالفت با ما هم همینه، اینی که با نظام اسلامی مخالفت می شود. این در مقابل این ساختار شکنی بیکار ننشستن. از روز اول دشمنی ها شروع شد، از جنگ، از تحریم، از فحش، از تهمت، از نفوذ، از توطئه، از کار امنیتی، از کار فرهنگی. هر کاری میتوانستن از ایجاد اختلاف داخلی با خرج کردن پول دریغ نکردن. در ایران در همه موارد هم شکست خوردن. راز پرشکوه و افتخار بخش این نظام و ماندگاری این نظام همین دو کلمه است، یعنی جمهوری و اسلام. همراهی این دو کلمه با هم و موجودی که از این دو کلمه تشکیل شده، این باید هم پایدار بمونه، هم جمهوری و هم اسلامی. مردم و اسلام. جمهوری یعنی مردم، اسلامی هم که یعنی اسلام.
انقلاب اسلامی با همه انقلاب‌های دیگر متفاوت است.
نه یک انقلاب صرفاً معنوی و فرهنگی است، نه یک انقلاب صرفاً اقتصادی است، نه یک انقلاب صرفاً سیاسی است، یک انقلاب همه جانبه است، مثل خود اسلام است. همونطوری که اسلام ابعاد معنوی و اخلاقی دارد، ابعاد الهی دارد، در عین حال ناظر به زندگی مردم است. بعد اقتصادی، بعد سیاسی، بعد اجتماعی در اسلام وجود دارد. انقلاب اسلامی هم یک انقلاب دارای ابعاد مختلف بود.
انقلاب جهش ایجاد کرد در کشور. شما در زمینه سیاسی این جهش رو میبینید، در زمینه علمی میبینید، در زمینه فناوری میبینید، در زمینه اخلاق اجتماعی این جهش رو میبینید. خیلی این انقلاب چیز عجیب بود. این حالا دردسر برای اربابای دنیا در سرها خواهد داشت. حالا اول کارم.
Yeah, that's a pretty great video. I view Iran as an anti-imperialist country. You go to my website, Caleb Maupin Books. You can watch the documentary film I made in Iran. You can also see it on the CPI website, Iranian Dream. Iran is a stronghold of anti-imperialism. So, yeah, I thought I would show that video. And I'm starting to fade, shout out to David Fox. Good to see you, David. We did a whole thing about Rosa Luxemburg earlier tonight, working on the project. Thank you for the suggestion. Almost done. I think I'm going to call it a night, so thanks everybody. It's been fun. We'll be back probably tomorrow night. I don't see why not. But yeah, join the Center for Political Innovation. We're always doing great stuff. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Going to put on the closing music. We'll be back. All right. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.